My name is Clara Hayes, and for the last 8 years, my home has been a series of beige-walled barracks, dusty forward operating bases, and the cramped, humming interior of an armored vehicle. I'm a sergeant in the United States Army. At 28, I've missed 7 Christmases, countless birthdays, and the slow, mundane unfolding of the lives of the people I left behind in the misty Pacific Northwest. After so long away, I was finally coming home. The countdown had been a quiet ritual, a number I'd scrawl on a corner of my calendar and then erase each morning. My duffel bags were packed, gifts carefully wrapped and buffered against the jostling of travel. Then, 3 days before my flight, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my father, the first direct communication from him in nearly a decade. "We've moved on with our lives," it read. "Don't bother coming home." My breath caught in my throat, a sharp, painful hitch. I stared at the words, stark and black on the glowing screen, until they blurred. After a long moment, my thumbs moved, typing the only response that felt true. "Fine." 7 days later, I woke in a small, unfamiliar bed to the frantic buzzing of my phone. The screen was a constellation of missed calls, 20 of them, from every member of my immediate family, and one from their lawyer. The story of what happened in those 7 days isn't just about a fractured family. It's about the quiet strength we find when we're cast out, and the difficult, necessary truth that sometimes the home you have to build is one within yourself. I grew up in Port Blossom, a town nestled on the Washington coast where the scent of salt and pine hangs in the air and the sky is more often a soft, pearly gray than a brilliant blue. Our house, a sprawling cedar and glass marvel, perched on a bluff overlooking the Puget Sound. From the outside, the Thorns were the picture of coastal success. My father, Edward Thorn, had inherited a modest construction company from his father and, through sheer force of will, transformed Thorn and Sons Construction into a regional powerhouse. My mother, Catherine, a woman with a quiet passion for literature, had set aside her plans for a PhD to become the gracious hostess and silent partner my father required, raising us 3 children in a home that was as meticulously curated as one of her prized rose gardens. My older brother, Julian, was the crown prince, groomed from birth to inherit the Thorn and Sons empire. My younger sister, Sophie, was the prodigy, a brilliant, anxious girl who collected academic accolades the way other children collected seashells. And then there was me, Clara, the middle child, the quiet observer who never quite mastered the art of fitting into the elegant, pre-drawn lines of the Thorn family portrait. "Clara, why must you always be so contrary?" my father would ask, his voice a low rumble of disappointment whenever my interests veered from the prescribed path. "There's a place for you at the company. Your name is on the sign, too." But I didn't want my name on a sign. I wanted a map. While Julian learned to read blueprints and Sophie memorized Latin declensions, I found my purpose in the discipline and camaraderie of the high school's junior ROTC program. The structure didn't feel constricting. It felt like a foundation. For the first time, I felt I was building something for myself. The day I announced my enlistment, turning down the prestigious business school where my father had already placed a hefty, non-refundable deposit, was the day the carefully constructed facade of our family finally cracked. "No daughter of mine will throw her life away learning to take orders from fools and dodging bullets for politicians," he roared. His face, usually a mask of controlled composure, became a thunderous crimson. It was a storm warning I knew well. "Edward, please," my mother murmured, her hands fluttering at her throat like captive birds. She was always the peacekeeper, smoothing over the jagged edges of my father's temper. "I've made my decision, Dad," I said. My voice was steady, a shocking contrast to the tremor in my hands. "I ship out in a month." "Then you are no longer welcome in this house," he declared, his voice dropping to an icy calm that was far more terrifying than his rage. My mother gasped. Julian looked down at his shoes, a study in uncomfortable neutrality. Sophie, ever sensitive, began to cry. "Edward, you don't mean that," my grandmother, Eleanor Vance interjected. My mother's mother, she was a force of nature, the only person who had ever dared to weather my father's storms head-on. This is Clara's life. Her choice to make. It's a foolish choice, he spat, his eyes locking on mine. And one she will live to regret. I left for basic training with only my grandmother's blessing and a small, worn copy of Meditations she'd pressed into my hand. The next 8 years were a whirlwind of sun-scorched deserts, rain-soaked training grounds, and the profound, life-altering experience of serving in a combat zone. Basic training was a crucible that melted me down and forged me into something stronger. The drill sergeants didn't care that my last name was Thorne or what my father's net worth was. They cared if I could ruck 12 miles, if I could break down and reassemble my rifle in the dark, and if I had the back of the soldier next to me. It was there I met Maya Jensen, a sharp-witted woman from Chicago with a laugh that could cut through the thickest tension. We clung to each other through the grueling weeks of boot camp, were assigned to the same unit, and later deployed to Afghanistan together. She became the sister I'd always wanted, one bound not by blood, but by shared hardship and unwavering trust. You know, Hayes, Maya said one night, as we sat on the roof of our barracks watching a tapestry of stars emerge in the clear desert sky, people join for one of two reasons: to run from something or to find something. Which is it for you? A little of both, I guess, I admitted, the words feeling true for the first time. Running from expectations. Trying to find out who I am when no one's telling me who I'm supposed to be. My first tour was a trial by fire. The oppressive heat, the constant, low-level hum of danger, the waves of homesickness that would wash over me in the quiet moments. But I discovered I was good at my job. I was calm under pressure, a steady hand my peers came to rely on. I earned commendations, then a promotion. During my second tour, our unit was ambushed while escorting a convoy of medical supplies to a remote village. On pure instinct, I coordinated a defensive perimeter and led a small team on a flanking maneuver that suppressed the enemy fire long enough for the convoy to escape. We saved 12 lives that day, including 2 local children caught in the crossfire. The Army awarded me the Bronze Star with Valor. I sent the small article from the military newspaper home in a letter. My mother called, her voice thick with a mixture of pride and fear. Sophie sent a carefully worded card. Julian sent a one-line text, "Congrats. Stay safe." From my father, there was only silence. Over the years, communication with my family dwindled to a trickle of formal, sterile exchanges. My mother would call on holidays, her conversation a minefield of topics she carefully avoided, my father being the largest. Sophie would occasionally send updates about her doctoral work in psychology. Julian sent a generic Christmas card each year, signed simply, "From the Thorns." My only real connection was my grandmother, Eleanor, who wrote me long, flowing letters on thick, cream-colored stationery. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you," she wrote after I was promoted to sergeant. "He served in the Pacific, did you know?" Edward never likes to talk about it. He wants to believe every Thorne man was born in a boardroom, but there's soldier's blood in this family, too. Last October, when my grandmother suffered a minor stroke, a sharp, terrifying pang of regret went through me. I realized how much time had passed, how wide the chasm between my family and me had grown. I decided it was time to go home, at least for Christmas. My commanding officer, Captain Miller, was a good man who understood the complexities of family. "Life's too short for prolonged standoffs, Sergeant," he said when he approved my leave. "Sometimes you have to be the one to cross the no-man's land." I reached out to my mother first, then my siblings. The responses were cautiously optimistic. "Of course, we want you home, dear," my mother wrote in an email. "It's been far too long." "About damn time," was Julian's gruff text. "I can't wait to see you." Sophie replied, her message punctuated with a rare string of exclamation points. A fragile tendril of hope began to unfurl in my chest. Perhaps 8 years had been long enough. Perhaps the wounds had scabbed over. Perhaps my father had softened. Perhaps this Christmas would be the armistice I had secretly been praying for. I was wrong. The text arrived 3 days before my flight, while I was carefully packing the gifts I'd chosen with so much thought. A first edition Virginia Woolf for my mother, a beautiful antique brass compass for Julian, a set of rare psychological texts for Sophie, and a soft cashmere throw for Grandma Eleanor. The notification simply said, "Dad." My heart gave a painful lurch. With a shaking hand, I opened it. "We've moved on with our lives. Your room is Julian's home office now. Don't bother coming home for Christmas. It will only upset your mother." I read it once, twice, a third time. Each word was a precision strike. The cold dismissal, the finality of it, and the casual cruelty of using my mother's supposed feelings as a shield for his own rigid pride. My first impulse was to dial her number to ask if this was true. But I stopped myself. How many times had I watched her choose a fragile piece over standing up for me? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I composed and deleted a dozen angry, wounded replies. In the end, I typed a single word. Fine. That word was a vessel carrying the weight of 8 years of hurt, loneliness, and a final, weary resignation. It was an acknowledgement that some bridges are not meant to be crossed, but burned. Captain Miller found me a few minutes later, sitting on my bunk, staring at the wall. "Hayes, thought you'd be halfway to the airfield by now." I wordlessly handed him my phone. He read the text, his jaw tightening. "Your father's a damn fool," he said, handing it back. "Looks like I'll be enjoying the gourmet holiday meals in the mess hall after all," I said, my voice unnaturally light as I started to unpack the gifts. "Like hell you are," Maya said, appearing in the doorway. "My folks have a cabin in the Cascades. They've been begging me to bring you for years. You're officially out of excuses. I don't want to intrude on your family." "Shut up, Hayes." Maya grabbed my half-unpacked duffel and began efficiently refilling it. "My mom already cross-stitched a stocking with your name on it. You're not getting out of it." I appreciated her fiercely protective friendship, but the thought of celebrating a loud, happy family Christmas felt like it would only amplify my own sense of loss. "I appreciate it, Maya, more than you know," I said, "but I think I just need some time to myself. To process." Captain Miller nodded. "Your leave is approved regardless, Sergeant. Use it however you see fit." That night, I made a new plan. I would still go to Washington, but not to my family's glass house on the bluff. I went online and found a small, secluded cabin for rent just outside Port Blossom. A place to retreat, to think, and maybe to find some kind of closure on my own terms. The flight to Seattle was gray and solitary. As the small prop plane made its final descent toward the tiny regional airport near Port Blossom, the familiar landscape of dark green forests and churning, slate-colored water unfolded below. Memories I had carefully packed away began to surface. Christmas mornings with stockings hung from the massive stone fireplace, the smell of my mother's spiced apple cake, the shared thrill of sledding down the big hill behind our house with Julian and Sophie, our laughter echoing in the crisp air. For a fleeting moment, I let myself feel the full, crushing weight of what I had lost, or perhaps, what I had never truly had. The rental cabin was the antithesis of the Thorne family home. It was small and rustic, with a charmingly mismatched collection of furniture, a braided rag rug on the wide plank floor, and a temperamental but effective wood-burning stove. It was quiet, it was clean, and for the next 2 weeks, it was mine. After dropping my bags, I drove into town for groceries. As I stood in the brightly lit aisle of the local market, debating between brands of coffee, a voice from my past called out, "Clara? Clara Hayes, is that you?" I turned to see Sarah Jenkins, my best friend from high school. Her dark, curly hair was cut short now, and there were faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes, but her smile was as warm and genuine as I remembered. "Sarah." I abandoned my shopping basket and pulled her into a hug, a sudden, sharp wave of gratitude for a friendly face washing over me. "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" When did you get back? Are you home for good? Why didn't you tell me you were coming? The questions tumbled out of her in a rush. Just for the holidays, I explained, keeping my tone light. It was all a bit last minute. Your parents must be over the moon. I saw your mom at the post office last week, and she didn't say a word. I hesitated, the lie I was about to tell feeling heavy on my tongue. Yeah, well, you know. Surprise. Sarah's smile faltered as she studied my face, her perceptive eyes reading the story I wasn't telling. You're not staying with them, are you? I rented a little cabin up by Heron Lake. She nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. Let me buy you a coffee. We need to catch up. Properly. Over steaming mugs in a cozy corner of the daily grind, I gave Sarah the edited version of the story, that there was still tension with my father, that I needed some space. Honestly, I'm not surprised, she said, stirring her latte. He's been different these last few years. More wound up. My dad's company used to get a lot of subcontracting work from Thorne and Sons, but a few years ago, that just stopped. No explanation. What do you mean? I don't know all the details. Just that there have been whispers. Big changes at the company, a lot of the old local guys getting pushed out. She looked down at her cup. He tells people you chose not to come home, by the way. He's been saying it for years. The news was a fresh sting. While I had been serving my country, my own father had been meticulously rewriting our history, painting me as the heartless, ungrateful daughter to anyone who would listen. Well, I said, taking a final sip of my coffee, I'm here now. Whether he likes it or not. The next morning, a sharp, insistent knock on the cabin door woke me. My body went rigid, my hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm that wasn't there before my brain reminded me I was in a rental cabin in Washington, not a barracks in Kandahar. 8 years of combat readiness is a hard habit to break. I peered through the peephole, and my heart skipped a beat. It was my grandmother, Eleanor, leaning on her elegant silver-topped cane, her expression one of fond exasperation. Were you ever going to tell me you were in town? Or were you planning to let me find out from the town gossip? She demanded the moment I opened the door, though the sternness in her voice was belied by the warmth in her eyes. Oh, look at you. Still standing as if you're expecting a surprise inspection. I consciously relaxed my posture and enveloped her in a hug, surprised by how small and fragile she felt in my arms. Grandma, how did you find me? I asked, helping her out of her coat. Sarah Jenkins's mother, of course. This town is a sieve, dear, you should know that. She settled into the armchair by the window, her gaze sweeping over the rustic interior. Now, tell me why you're hiding out in this glorified woodshed instead of in the room your mother has kept exactly as you left it. Dad made it clear I wasn't welcome. She let out a long, weary sigh. That son of mine. His pride has always been a fortress with walls too high to see over. But there's more to it this time, Clara. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. The business is in trouble. Serious trouble. What kind of trouble? Financial, legal. I'm not privy to the details. Edward doesn't confide in me anymore. But he's changed. He's become secretive, controlling. He monitors Catherine's comings and goings. Julian made some disastrous investments with the company's capital. And Sophie. Sophie dropped out of her PhD program months ago and hasn't told him. The image she painted was deeply unsettling, a family quietly imploding, held together only by a fragile, polished veneer. Why are you telling me this, Grandma? Because you deserve to know the truth of what you've come home to, she said, her cool, dry hand covering mine. And because, for better or for worse, they are still your family. After Eleanor left, with a promise to visit again and a vow of secrecy, I tried to make sense of her revelations. My phone remained silent. Not a single call or text from my mother or siblings, though I had no doubt Sarah's mother had ensured the entire town knew of my return. I was contemplating my next move when another knock sounded at the door. This time, it was a tall man with kind, steady eyes and a tool belt slung low on his hips. Clara Hayes? I'm Ben Carter. The rental agency sent me over. You reported a leaky faucet in the kitchen. He worked with a quiet efficiency, but I caught him glancing at the military-issue duffel bag by the door and the dog tags I'd unthinkingly left on the small coffee table. Army, he asked as he tightened a final connection under the sink. 8 years, I confirmed. Just on leave. My brother did 4 in the Marines, he said, standing and wiping his hands on a rag. He paused, his expression shifting. You're Edward Thorne's daughter, aren't you? I braced myself for the subtle shift in attitude, the polite distance people usually adopted when they made the connection. Instead, Ben just frowned. Must be a strange time to come home. What do you mean? He looked uneasy. Just town talk. Nothing important. Please, I said. I'd rather know. Ben hesitated, then leaned against the counter. There are stories about Thorne and Sons. Big government contracts that came out of nowhere. Local competitors getting underbid by margins that don't make sense. A lot of the guys my dad used to work with, guys who worked with your grandfather, have been shut out of major regional projects. He shrugged. Like I said, just talk. But it wasn't just talk. It was a piece of the puzzle that fit perfectly with what Eleanor had told me. In the following days, I reacquainted myself with Port Blossom. The main street was a mix of the familiar and the new. The little park where I'd spent countless summer afternoons now had a fancy new playground. The high school had a new science wing, named for a tech mogul who'd retired in the area. Not, I noted, for my father. Everywhere I went, I felt a current of whispers in my wake. The prodigal Thorne daughter, back from the war, hiding out in a cabin instead of taking her place in the family mansion. On the 4th day of my leave, I saw Sophie. She was huddled over a laptop at the Daily Grind, the same cafe where we'd once spent hours studying together. She saw me and froze, her face a rapid-fire succession of shock, guilt, and an emotion I couldn't place, but that looked alarmingly like fear. Clara, she breathed, as if I were an apparition. You're really here. I gestured to the empty chair opposite her. Can I join you? She cast a nervous glance toward the door before giving a curt nod. I can't stay long. Up close, she looked utterly depleted. The dark circles under her eyes were stark against her pale skin. The bright, confident scholar I remembered had been replaced by a thin, brittle version of herself who flinched every time the espresso machine hissed. How are you, Soph? I asked gently. I'm fine. Just busy with my dissertation. The lie slipped out so smoothly it was clear she'd had practice. Grandma told me you left the program. Her eyes widened in panic. Don't you dare tell Dad you know. Please, Clara. What is going on, Sophie? What's happening to this family? She began gathering her things with frantic, jerky movements. I shouldn't be seen with you. Dad would be furious. Dad would what? She slung her bag over her shoulder. Dad's not well, Clara. In his head, you should just leave. Stay away. It's better for you. She leaned in, her voice a desperate whisper. And it's better for us. Before I could demand an explanation, she was gone, the little bell above the door tinkling a cheerful, mocking farewell. That evening, Ben stopped by with a load of firewood he said was extra from another job. I suspected it was an excuse to check on me, and I found I was grateful for both the wood and the company. So, learned any more of your hometown secrets? He asked as we sat by the crackling fire, drinking mugs of hot chocolate. Just that everyone seems to be terrified of my father, I said. Including his own children. Ben nodded, staring into the flames. Edward Thorne always commanded more fear than respect. But lately, it's different. Different how? It feels desperate. He's calling in old favors, making threats. The word is he's in over his head on some of those government jobs. Government jobs? The phrase snagged on a memory, a fragment of a conversation I'd had with Captain Miller before my leave. Thorne, isn't your father in construction? There's been some chatter up the chain about irregularities in bidding on military infrastructure projects in the Northwest. I had dismissed it at the time. Now a cold unease settled in my stomach. Then, what exactly does Thorne and Sons build these days? That's the thing, he said, looking at me with curiosity. They pivoted a few years back. Almost exclusively government work now. Barracks, training facilities, secure storage depots, stuff that requires high-level security clearance to even bid on. He paused. Didn't you know? I didn't. And I was beginning to suspect that was entirely by design. On the 5th day, returning from a run along the misty lake shore, I saw it, a sleek black sedan parked on the shoulder of the road 100 yards from my cabin. It was a car built for corporate executives, not for navigating the muddy lanes of Heron Lake. Later, when I drove into town, the same car materialized in my rearview mirror. It followed me with a professional patience that set my teeth on edge. I started running counter-surveillance drills, techniques ingrained in me by years of training. I made a series of illogical turns, doubled back on a quiet side street, varied my speed. The sedan stayed with me. At a stoplight, I caught a glimpse of the driver's profile. It was my father. This wasn't about a strained family relationship anymore. This was surveillance. That evening, I found Julian nursing a whiskey at the Salty Dog, a dark wood-paneled dive bar on the waterfront. He was alone, hunched over the bar, looking years older than his 32 years. "Buy a soldier a drink?" I asked, sliding onto the stool next to him. He flinched, then managed a weak, watery smile. "Look what the cat dragged in." 3 whiskeys later, his carefully maintained composure began to fray at the edges. "You were the smart one, Clarabelle," he slurred, using a childhood nickname that felt like a relic from another lifetime. "Got out when you could. Should have gone with you." "What's happening at the company, Julian?" He let out a short, bitter laugh. "The company? It's a house of cards, sis. All smoke and mirrors." He leaned closer, his breath sour with whiskey. "Dad flew too close to the sun. Bid on contracts we had no business bidding on. Then I made some investments that didn't pan out. So it's financial trouble? Financial, legal, ethical, you name it, we're in it." He drained his glass. "But Dad found a way to fix it. He always does." "What way?" Julian's bloodshot eyes met mine in the dim light. "You don't want to know, Clara. Trust me." He pushed himself unsteadily to his feet. "Gotta go. Dad has a tracker on my car." The next morning, a text from an unknown number appeared on my phone. The Cascade Diner on Route 12. 11 a.m. Come alone. Mom. The diner was a good 30-minute drive out of town, a neutral, anonymous location where she wouldn't risk being seen. I arrived early, choosing a booth that gave me a clear view of the entrances. My mother walked in at precisely 11, looking impeccable in a cashmere coat and pearls. But up close, she radiated a brittle tension. New lines were etched around her mouth, and her hands trembled as she pulled off her leather gloves. "Clara," she said, her voice catching. "You look so strong. 8 years in the army will do that." She winced, the mere mention of my career still a tender spot. "Your father doesn't know I'm here," she said, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. "He checks my phone, the car's GPS. I told him I had a hair appointment in the next town over." She reached across the table, her hand hovering just above mine. "You need to leave, Clara. Go back to your base. This Christmas visit was a mistake." "Why, Mom? And why is Dad having me followed?" He was furious when he found out you'd taken leave. He's not thinking rationally anymore. He blames you." "Blames me for what?" "For everything," she whispered. "The problems with the business, Julian's mistakes, Sophie dropping out. He has this idea in his head that if you had just stayed, if you had joined the company as you were supposed to, none of this would have happened." It was a staggering, irrational leap of logic, but it was also pure Edward Thorne, manufacturing an external target to avoid confronting his own failures. "I need to understand what's happening." "No, you need to protect yourself," she insisted, standing abruptly. "I've warned you." That's all I can do. After she scurried away, I sat in the vinyl booth for a long time, the pieces clicking into place with a sickening finality. My military training had taught me to gather intelligence, assess threats, formulate a strategy. It was time to apply those skills to my own family. Back at the cabin, I opened my laptop and began to dig. Public records and business filings confirmed the shift. 5 years ago, Thorne and Sons had abandoned almost all its local commercial work in favor of lucrative, exclusive government contracts. Military contracts. I found old articles from a regional business journal detailing complaints from competitors about unfair bidding practices, all of which were eventually dismissed. Then I found it. A press release from 4 years ago announcing Thorne and Sons had been awarded a massive contract to build a secure communications facility at a nearby Army base. The release boasted of the company's unique qualifications, citing its executive team's access to high-level military security clearance through a veteran family member. Thorne and Sons had no veteran leadership. Unless the blood drained from my face. My father hadn't been ignoring my military career, he'd been weaponizing it. That evening, I found a note tucked under the windshield wiper of my rental car. The handwriting was my father's elegant, forceful script. It contained only 5 words, "A good soldier knows when to retreat." My hands were shaking as I dialed Captain Miller's number, using a secure messaging app on my laptop, not my traceable phone. "Sir, I need to ask an official question. Has my service record or security clearance ever been accessed for the purpose of civilian contract verification?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "There have been inquiries, Sergeant," he said cautiously. "It's not uncommon for family-owned businesses bidding on military work." "Why?" "Sir, I need to know if I have ever, on any official document, authorized Thorne and Sons Construction to use my military credentials." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. "Clara, are you telling me you never signed such an authorization?" "Never, sir." "I'll look into it immediately. In the meantime, document everything. And watch your 6." I didn't sleep that night. The puzzle was complete. My father's failing company. My high-level security clearance. The sudden, miraculous influx of government contracts. The federal auditors sniffing around. And now my unexpected return, threatening to expose the entire charade. He wasn't just my estranged father. He was the architect of a fraud, and he had been building the case to make me its scapegoat. I woke on the 7th day of my leave to my phone vibrating itself off the nightstand. 20 missed calls illuminated the screen, 5 from my mother, 7 from Sophie, 3 from Julian, 4 from Eleanor, and 1 from a name I hadn't seen in years, Howard Reynolds, my father's lawyer and oldest friend. The voicemails began with a tone of strained calm and escalated into frantic urgency. "Clara, it's your mother. Please, call me the second you get this." "Clara, pick up the phone." "It's Sophie. Dad's in the hospital." "Clara Bell, it's Julian. Dad had a heart attack last night." "It's bad. Please, just call me." "Clara, dear, it's your grandmother. Whatever you are thinking of doing, I urge you to pause. Your father needs his family." The final voicemail sent a sliver of ice through my veins. "Ms. Hayes, this is Howard Reynolds. I represent the legal interests of the Thorne family. It is imperative that we speak regarding the matter of certain authorizations before this situation escalates. Please call my office at your earliest convenience." My mind raced as I dressed and drove toward Port Blossom General Hospital. Was this real? Or was it another elaborate manipulation, a trap to lure me into a public place where federal investigators might be waiting? The ICU waiting room was a diorama of the Thorne family's dysfunction. My mother sat ramrod straight in a corner, her makeup flawless, her composure a brittle shell. Sophie paced frantically, gnawing on her thumbnail, a nervous habit my father had always ruthlessly criticized. Julian stood staring out the window, his shoulders slumped in defeat. They all turned as one when I entered. "How is he?" I asked, my voice flat. "He's stable," Sophie said, her voice sharp with accusation. They're prepping him for a triple bypass. What did you do, Clara? Excuse me. He was fine until you came back. He got your text last night and collapsed 20 minutes later. I didn't text him. Don't lie, she snapped. He showed it to all of us. You threatening to go to the authorities. After everything he's done for you. A cold, quiet clarity washed over me. I didn't send a text. And what exactly has Dad done for me in the last 8 years? Besides forge my signature and commit federal fraud using my name. The accusation hung in the air, sucking the sound from the room. My mother's face went ashen. You don't know what you're talking about, Julian mumbled, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. Don't I? Thorne and Sons suddenly lands a string of military contracts that all require security clearance. Dad has me followed, warns me to retreat, and then manufactures a text message to make me look like a blackmailer. I looked from one pale face to the next. What did he do? What did you all let him do? Ms. Hayes. Howard Reynolds stood in the doorway, his expression grim. May I have a word? I followed him into a quiet, sterile corridor. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed, who had always seemed like an immutable fixture of my family's life. Your father has suffered a significant cardiac event, he began, his tone somber. So I hear, I said. Right after he faked a text message from me. Reynolds studied me, his lawyerly gaze assessing. I've known your father for 40 years. He is a proud, difficult man. But he loves his family. Is that why he was planning to let me take the fall for his crimes? He didn't flinch. The situation is complex. Then simplify it for me, Howard. The company was on the brink of collapse, he said with a sigh. The recession, some bad investments. The military contracts were a lifeline. But to get them, he needed you. My security clearance, you mean. He gambled that you would never find out. The work itself was sound. The credentials were just to open the door. It's still fraud, Howard. Yes. And when federal auditors started asking questions, he became desperate. He needed a contingency plan. Me, I said flatly. The contingency plan was me. Before he could craft a response, my grandmother appeared at the end of the hall, moving with a speed that defied her age. Clara, she said, her voice tight with an urgency I'd never heard from her. She thrust a stiff manila folder into my hands. I found these in Edward's office safe. I opened it. Inside were official-looking documents, contract applications, security clearance authorizations, vendor registration forms for the Department of Defense. And on the signature line of each one was a careful, deliberate forgery of my name. I always knew Edward was hiding something, Eleanor said, her chin high. After we spoke, I decided it was time to stop suspecting and start knowing. Reynolds looked horrified. Eleanor, you can't just break into a private safe. I helped design that house, Howard, she retorted coolly. I know all its secrets. I've made copies. These are the originals. A sudden commotion erupted down the hall. My mother cried out. A nurse and a doctor rushed toward my father's room. It's his heart, Sophie called out, her face a mask of terror. He's crashing. For a single, agonizing moment, I hesitated. He was still my father. The man who taught me how to sail, who once held my hand at the county fair. Then I remembered the cold finality of his text and the quiet dignity of my own response. Fine. It hadn't just been a word of resignation. It had been a declaration of independence. Turning to Howard Reynolds, my voice as steady as it had ever been on a battlefield, I said, I need to make a phone call. To my legal counsel. In the Army. The military, I discovered, moves with breathtaking speed when one of its own is compromised. By that evening, I was in a secure conference room in a federal building, laying out the story for 2 lawyers from the Judge Advocate General's Corps. They listened without interruption as I detailed everything, with Eleanor's folder of forgeries serving as the centerpiece. This is identity theft, wire fraud, and a serious breach of national security protocols, Major Kendrick, the senior attorney, said when I had finished. You did the right thing, Sergeant. The absolute right thing. What happens now? I asked, the reality of the situation beginning to sink in. We cooperate fully with the ongoing federal investigation into Thorne and Sons. Your father, and anyone else with knowledge of the fraud, will face the consequences. He looked at me, his professional demeanor softening. I know this is your family. That doesn't make it any easier. My family, I said, my voice cracking slightly, made their choices. When I stepped out into the cool, damp night air, Ben Carter was leaning against his old pickup truck. Sarah told me where you'd be, he said simply. Figured you might not want to be alone right now. That small, unassuming act of kindness was the thing that finally broke me. The military composure I had maintained for days crumbled. He didn't say anything, just opened the passenger door and drove me back to the quiet solitude of the cabin. He made us both a cup of tea, and I told him everything, the words tumbling out in a torrent of anger, grief, and betrayal. The worst part, I said, staring into the depths of my mug, is that they look at me like I'm the criminal. Like my crime of discovery is worse than their crime of deceit. It's easier to blame the person holding the mirror, Ben said quietly, than to look at the reflection. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings and interviews. The federal investigation, bolstered by my testimony and evidence, accelerated. My father's surgery was a success, but he remained in the cardiac wing under guard. I stayed away, focusing on the methodical process of clearing my name. Julian found me at the cabin a few days later. He looked like a ghost. They froze everything, he said, his voice hollow. All the accounts. The credit cards. They interviewed me for 6 hours. Did you know Julian? I asked him directly. About him using my name? He wouldn't look at me. I suspected. I didn't want to know. And you were okay with that? With him preparing to throw me under the bus. I didn't know about that part, he whispered. I swear. Not until it all blew up. I'm sorry, Clara. I should have stood up to him. We all should have. Years ago. It was a flimsy apology against the backdrop of such a profound betrayal, but it was the first crack in the wall of denial. Sophie came the next day. She was less repentant, more bewildered. They're talking about prison time, she said, her eyes wide with disbelief. For Dad. Is that what you wanted? What I want is for the truth to matter, I said. He was trying to save us. The family, the business. By sacrificing me, I countered. The one he'd already cast aside. That's not fair. You're the one who left. I enlisted, Sophie. I didn't abandon you. Dad was the one who drew the line in the sand because I wouldn't be who he wanted me to be. My voice softened. And you let him do the same thing to you, didn't you? Why did you really leave your PhD program? Tears welled in her eyes. I couldn't take the pressure anymore. The panic attacks. The constant need to be the perfect academic daughter to make up for you being the disappointment. She wiped her eyes angrily. I never wanted to be a research psychologist. I wanted to teach kindergarten. One by one, the secrets of the house on the bluff came spilling out. My father, terrified of failure, had tightened his grip until his family was suffocating. His pride wouldn't let him admit his business was failing, so he committed a crime. And his children, cowed by years of his domineering rule, had become complicit in their own silence. My mother came a week later. She seemed diminished, smaller, without my father's larger-than-life presence to orbit. He's asking for you, she said. The doctors say reducing his stress is critical for his recovery. And I'm supposed to facilitate that? Pretend he didn't try to ruin my life and my career. I'm not asking you to pretend, she said, her hands twisting the wedding band on her finger. I'm asking you to listen. What he did, it was wrong. Unforgivable. She finally met my gaze. I knew something wasn't right. The secrecy, the locked office. But I never let myself imagine this. I should have protected you, Clara. All these years, I chose his peace over your truth. I failed you. It wasn't absolution, but it was an admission. A hairline fracture in the foundation of lies. I'll think about it, was all I could offer. My leave was extended indefinitely. Captain Miller called every few days. "Take all the time you need, Sergeant," he said. "Your real family is waiting for you when you're ready." The federal case against my father was airtight. Facing a mountain of evidence, he accepted a plea deal. He would plead guilty to multiple counts of fraud, serve a reduced sentence of house arrest due to his health, and pay fines and restitution that would effectively liquidate the Thorne family fortune. Thorne and Sons Construction was placed into federal receivership. Slowly, tentatively, my family began to pick through the wreckage. My mother enrolled in a literature class at the local community college. Sophie applied to a master's program in early childhood education. Julian, stripped of his title and inheritance, took a job with a local builder, starting from the bottom, learning the trade with his hands instead of from a spreadsheet. I finally went to see my father 2 weeks after his release from the hospital. He was in the master bedroom, propped up on a sea of pillows, looking frail and old. The towering figure of my childhood was gone, replaced by a sick man tethered to medical machines. "Clara," he said, his voice a reedy whisper. I stood by the door, my posture automatically military straight. "Sir." "Don't," he said, wincing. "Don't call me that." "You haven't been my father for a long time," I replied, the words less angry than weary. A long, heavy silence filled the room. "Why?" I finally asked. "Why me?" He stared at his hands. "The business. Everything I built. It was dust. I was a failure. And you were a success. Strong. Honorable. I was proud of you." The admission was so quiet I almost missed it. I was so damn proud and so damn jealous. I couldn't stand it. "So I used your success to cover my failure." Tears tracked down his pale cheeks. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it." "No," I said softly, the chaplain's words from a grief counseling session coming back to me. "You don't. But forgiveness isn't for you. It's for me. It's about me choosing to put down the weight of all this anger." It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't a happy ending. It was just a beginning. The beginning of something new, something more honest, built not on a flawless facade, but on the rubble of difficult truths. That Christmas, we gathered at Eleanor's small, cozy cottage. My mother brought a simple, perfect apple cake. Sophie brought handmade paper snowflakes. Julian brought a cord of perfectly split firewood. Ben was there, a quiet, steady presence who fit seamlessly into the new, strange shape of our family. My father remained at home. His absence was a palpable thing, a space filled with both loss and relief. As winter slowly gave way to a cool, damp spring, I knew my time in Port Blossom was ending. I had 2 years left on my enlistment. After that, the future was an unmarked map. "I'm thinking of starting something here when I get out," I told Ben one evening as we walked along the beach, the waves washing the shore clean. "A nonprofit, helping vets transition back to civilian life. Using what I've learned to help them find their own way home." He squeezed my hand. "Sounds to me like you already have." The night before I flew back to my base, I sat in the quiet of the cabin that had been my sanctuary. The journey that had started with a cruel text and a one-word reply had ended up being the most important mission of my life. My father's rejection had not been an ending, but an unforeseen redirection. It had forced me to rely on my own strength, to define my own worth, to build my own tribe. I found my family not in the grand house on the bluff, but in the quiet loyalty of my grandmother, the fierce friendship of Maya, the steady kindness of Ben, and the cautious, healing apologies of my siblings. I had come home looking for acceptance from a family that couldn't give it, and in the process, I had found something far more valuable: acceptance of myself.